I grew up within advertising and branding agencies, but I started off on a very different trajectory. I was always on the account side of things. So basically, I was managing scopes and I was running timelines and handling project teams and in charge of client relationships. And I think the main part of the job that I had always really enjoyed was working really closely with creatives, as we call them in the advertising world, and really getting to sit in the rooms where the sausage was being made, getting to work really closely with designers, with strategists, and of course with writers. And then I think finally, like when COVID happened, I was just like, everything else is going belly up anyway. Like I might as well try. And so that was what led me to CCA. Before CCA, like I explored a bunch of other ways of kind of going about it. I looked at the really expensive like copywriting portfolio programs and I was working full time. Like I was working 80 hours a week and I didn't have the time or the money to step away and invest in one of these crazy programs. And I also honestly didn't really think I needed to because one, I don't think anyone really needs to. And two, like I had spent so many years around this field and adjacent fields already. And so I was like, you know what? I want something that is flexible, but really informative, that's going to let me learn from really talented people, meet other people who kind of want to go down the same road. And yeah, that's how I found CCA. And then, I enrolled, I put together kind of a starter portfolio of spec work, shopped it around to a few people in the business that I knew and that I trusted. And then finally got to a point where I'd gotten enough kind of positive reinforcement and feedback on it to quit my full-time job, take a part-time job as an account person to pay the bills and keep the lights on, and then spent the other 50% of my time, which I was very upfront with my agency about, building out an initial client roster. And that was back in 2021. So since then, I've kind of grown into a bit of a boutique copy and content studio. And now I've got an LLC and I call myself Word Up. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. So I think I enrolled in CCA in January 2021. It was around then. It took me 5 to 6 months to put an initial spec portfolio together. And then I think 6 months in, I was sort of like, okay, like I'm getting good feedback. Like seems like I'm not insane for wanting to pursue this. Seems like I kind of like know what I'm doing. And I think around that time too, a recruiter that I had talked to came back around to me and kind of said, look, like I don't have any copy jobs, but I do have this part-time freelance account director position at another agency. I can set you up for an interview. And so that's how I landed that interview 6 months in. And I kind of made the decision to be really honest with that agency right from the jump. And I said, look, like I will give you all of me for 50% of my time, as long as it's very clear and understood that for the rest of the time, I'm going to be building out this book. And they were like, oh, like building out a book, what do you mean? And I explained it to them and they were like, well, sometimes we get an overflow of comms work. Comms in their world was basically like brand writing, strategic writing. We'll let you know if we do. And then that was ultimately what led to my first freelance agency gig as a writer. So one thing really kind of like folded into another. I thought I was kind of crazy, to be honest. I was like, oh, like I'm coming in here talking a big game. But I also really felt like it was one of the things that we had learned pretty early on in CCA. It was like, say that you're a writer, say that you're a copywriter, because you now are. This sounds very corny, but I came to New York for the first time when I was 16, and that place in Times Square was literally the first spot I went to. And I like stood there with my best friend from high school, fresh off the plane from California. And I was kind of looking up at that big tower that they have with like the three prime ad spots on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like that is cool. And at the time, I didn't really want to be a writer. I actually wanted to work in fashion editorial. So I was thinking about it differently. And I was like, oh, how cool to like style a fashion campaign that goes up there. But still, like I was looking at that slot and I was like, oh, how sick to like be up there. And then I went back when the campaign went live a couple of months ago and I looked up and I was like, it's not a fashion campaign, but it's a campaign. And I wrote it. So
Yeah.
that felt really good.